The envelope sat on her mahogany desk like a coiled snake waiting to strike. Clarissa's perfectly manicured fingers reached for it, probably thinking it was another party invitation or some fancy contract. I watched from across town, sipping my tea, knowing what was coming. When she tore it open, I imagined her face draining of all color. An eviction notice. From me. Her own mother. You're probably wondering how a 72-year-old woman ends up evicting her own daughter from a $7.2 million mansion. Well, let me tell you, it didn't happen overnight, and it sure wasn't my first choice. But sometimes, when the people you love most look you dead in the eye and call you worthless, you realize that kindness without boundaries is just another word for doormat. My name is Eleanor Whitford, and before you judge me, you need to hear the whole story. Because what happened between my daughter and me wasn't just about a house or money or even pride. It was about the moment when silence becomes more powerful than screaming, and patience becomes the sharpest weapon you'll ever hold. Let me take you back to where this all started falling apart. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever given someone everything, only to have them spit in your face? Have you ever been so hurt by family that you couldn't even cry, just stood there frozen, wondering how things got so broken? Hi viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. 3 years ago, I made what everyone said was the most generous move of my life. I handed my daughter the keys to this incredible mansion up in the hills, the kind of place you see in magazines with the sweeping staircases and windows that stretch from floor to ceiling. Harold, my late husband, and I bought it as our dream retirement home. We'd spent 40 years building our real estate business from nothing, working late nights while our friends were out dancing and buying new cars. Every penny we saved, every deal we closed, was for this moment. But Harold died before we could enjoy it together. Heart attack, sudden, brutal. One day he was here making his terrible jokes at breakfast, the next day he was gone. The house felt too big after that, too empty, echoing with memories that hurt more than they comforted. I moved into a modest townhouse across the city, something smaller where I could think straight. Clarissa was struggling back then. Her marriage had just ended, her career was stuck, and she was living in a cramped apartment that barely fit her furniture. As a mother, watching your child suffer is worse than suffering yourself. So I thought, why not give her the mansion? I didn't need all that space. The gift wasn't just about the house, it was me trying to tell her that even though her father was gone and her marriage had failed, she still had me. She still had family. She still had value. The day I gave her those keys, she cried. Real tears, not the fake kind. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe and whispered thank you about 100 times. For those first few months, things seemed perfect. She'd call me every week, invite me over for dinner, show me how she'd decorated each room. I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were growing closer after years of distance. But something shifted. It happened so gradually I almost didn't notice at first. The weekly calls became monthly. The dinner invitations stopped. When I dropped by with groceries or homemade bread, because old habits die hard and mothers never stop wanting to take care of their children, she'd seem annoyed instead of grateful. Her friends started showing up more, expensive cars lining the circular driveway, champagne bottles cluttering the recycling bins. The mansion became her stage, and I became the stagehand she wished would just disappear. I told myself I was being sensitive. That she was just busy, enjoying her new life, finally happy after all that pain. I made excuses for every cancelled lunch, every unreturned text message, every time she looked right through me like I was a stranger instead of the woman who'd given birth to her. Then came that Sunday afternoon. The day everything broke wide open and couldn't be put back together. I'd baked fresh bread that morning, the kind Harold used to love with rosemary and sea salt baked into the crust. I also picked up some groceries because I knew Clarissa never remembered to stock her fridge properly, too busy with her social calendar to think about real food. I let myself in with the spare key she'd given me, calling out her name as I walked through the grand entrance with its crystal chandelier sparkling overhead. The sound of laughter echoed from the living room. Not the warm kind of laughter you share with people you love, but the sharp, cutting kind that makes you feel like you're the joke. I found Clarissa sprawled on the cream-colored sofa, surrounded by 5 or 6 of her friends, women I'd never met, dressed like they'd just stepped out of a fashion magazine, sipping champagne from glasses that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. "Mother," Clarissa said when she noticed me standing there holding my basket. Her voice wasn't warm. It was flat, almost irritated, like I'd interrupted something important. What are you doing here? I smiled, tried to shake off the chill in her tone. I brought you some bread and groceries, sweetheart. Thought you might need. We're in the middle of something, she cut me off. One of her friends whispered something, and they all giggled. I felt my cheeks burn but kept smiling. Years of practice had taught me how to hold my face steady even when my heart was cracking. I moved toward the kitchen, thinking I'd just put everything away and leave quietly. But as I started organizing the groceries on the marble countertop, I heard Clarissa's voice rise behind me, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mother, stop fussing around. Honestly, you're worthless in this house. You don't belong here. Just sit down, or better yet, go home. Worthless. The word hit me like a physical blow. I stood there frozen, holding a loaf of bread I'd woken up early to bake, and felt something inside me crack clean in half. The laughter from her friends swelled around me like a wave. I turned slowly and looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my child's face. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. She'd already turned back to her friends, dismissing me as easily as you'd swat away a fly. I could have said 1,000 things. Could have reminded her who bought this house. Could have pointed out that every beautiful thing surrounding her came from the money her father and I spent decades building. Could have told her exactly what I thought of her cruelty and her friends and her champagne-soaked afternoon, while I stood there like a servant in my own gift. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I smiled. I nodded. And I walked out of that mansion carrying my basket of bread and my shattered heart, leaving behind the last piece of hope I'd been holding on to. Because here's what 72 years of living had taught me: sometimes the loudest revenge is silence. Sometimes the most powerful response is patience. And sometimes the people who hurt you the most are just handing you the rope they'll eventually hang themselves with. They just don't know it yet. That night, alone in my townhouse, I sat in Harold's old armchair and thought about everything we'd built together. The late nights poring over property contracts. The risky investments that paid off. The careful planning and saving and sacrificing so our children would never struggle the way we had. And I thought about what Harold used to tell me when people underestimated us. Ellie, he'd say, squeezing my hand, never let anyone convince you that you have no worth. You built this empire as much as I did. Don't you ever forget that. But Clarissa had forgotten. Or maybe she'd never really known in the first place. What she also didn't know, what nobody knew except me and my lawyer, was that I'd never actually transferred the deed of that mansion into her name. The property was in a trust. A carefully constructed legal trust that Harold and I had set up 23 years ago when our business really started taking off. Our lawyer back then, a sharp woman named Patricia Chun, had insisted on it. Protect your assets, she'd said. You never know when family dynamics might shift. Harold and I had laughed at the time. Our kids would never turn on us, we'd thought. We were building all this for them, after all. But Patricia had seen enough family wars over money to know better, and she'd made us promise to keep our major properties in trust with us as trustees. We could allow family members to live in them, benefit from them, but the actual ownership would stay protected. That mansion, that beautiful $7.2 million house that Clarissa thought was hers? Legally, it was still mine. She was living there as a beneficiary of the trust, which in legal terms made her nothing more than a tenant. A tenant I'd been extraordinarily generous with, charging no rent, paying all the property taxes myself, even covering the astronomical utility bills. But tenants can be evicted. Even if they happen to be your daughter. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea going cold in my hands, watching the hours tick by on the old clock Harold had bought at an estate sale 30 years ago. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that word again. Worthless. And I saw the looks on her friends' faces, the way they'd laughed like I was some kind of servant who'd forgotten her place. When dawn finally broke through my kitchen window, I'd made my decision. Some people might call it cruel. Others might say I was overreacting to one bad moment. But here's what nobody else understood: that Sunday afternoon wasn't the first crack in our relationship. It was just the moment when all the other cracks finally split wide open and I couldn't pretend anymore that everything was fine. At exactly 9 a.m, I called Victor Callahan. He'd taken over our legal affairs after Patricia retired, and he knew our family history better than most therapists. The phone rang 3 times before his familiar voice answered, warm but professional. "Eleanor," he said, "this is early for you. Everything all right?" No, I said simply. I need to evict Clarissa from the mansion. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Victor cleared his throat, and I could hear him shifting in his chair, probably sitting up straighter. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You heard me correctly. I want her out. How fast can we make this happen? Victor had been our lawyer for 15 years. He'd handled our biggest deals, negotiated contracts worth millions, never flinched at anything. But I could hear the shock in his voice now. Eleanor, I need to ask, what happened? Last I knew, you two were on good terms. I told him everything. The growing distance, the cancelled plans, the way she'd stopped calling unless she needed something. And then I told him about Sunday, about standing in that kitchen holding homemade bread while my daughter called me worthless in front of her friends. My voice stayed steady through all of it, but my hand shook so badly I had to set down my teacup. When I finished, Victor was quiet again. Then he said something that surprised me. You know what, Eleanor? I've been doing this job for 28 years, and I've seen a lot of families destroy each other over money. But I've also learned that sometimes the kindest people get walked on the most, and there comes a point where standing up for yourself isn't cruel, it's necessary. Those words settled something in my chest. I wasn't being vindictive. I wasn't being petty. I was simply reminding my daughter that respect isn't optional, even between family. Especially between family. So legally, where do we stand? I asked. Victor started explaining in that careful lawyer way of his. The trust was ironclad. I had full authority as trustee to revoke Clarissa's residency at any time. Because she'd never paid rent and wasn't on the deed, she had fewer protections than a standard tenant, but we'd still need to follow proper eviction procedures. Notice period, documentation, the whole legal process. How long? I asked. With a 30-day notice? We could have her out in 5 weeks if she doesn't contest it. If she fights back legally, it could drag out a few months, but ultimately you'll win. The law is completely on your side here. 5 weeks. That felt both too long and not long enough. Part of me wanted to march over there immediately and tell her to pack her bags. But the calmer part, the part that had learned patience through 40 years of business dealings, knew that doing this properly was important. No yelling, no drama, no scenes that she could twist into making me look like the villain. Draw up the papers, I said. I want this done right. Eleanor, Victor said gently, are you absolutely sure? Once we file this, there's no taking it back. Your relationship with Clarissa will probably never recover. I looked around my small kitchen, at the simple life I'd chosen after Harold died. No grand staircases or crystal chandeliers here. Just an old formica countertop, mismatched chairs, and photos of happier times on the walls. Photos of Clarissa as a little girl, holding my hand at the beach, laughing with chocolate ice cream on her face. Back when I was her whole world and she was mine. Our relationship is already broken, I said quietly. She just doesn't know it yet. Have you ever reached a point where you realized that protecting someone from consequences was actually hurting them more than helping? Where being the soft place to land had turned you into a doormat they wiped their feet on without even noticing. By noon, Victor had drafted the preliminary documents. By 3 in the afternoon, I was sitting in his office, a pen in my hand, staring down at papers that would change everything. The eviction notice was surprisingly simple, just a few pages of legal language that boiled down to you have 30 days to vacate the premises. My hand hesitated over the signature line. This was my daughter. The baby I'd rocked to sleep 1,000 nights. The little girl who'd run to me crying over scraped knees and broken friendships. The young woman I'd helped through her divorce, holding her while she sobbed about how her husband had betrayed her. And now I was the one serving her papers. But then I remembered her voice. You're worthless in this house. Said so casually, so easily, like I was nothing more than an annoyance she needed to brush aside. And I remembered something else Harold used to say, the people who hurt you the most are usually the ones you've protected from ever facing real consequences. I signed my name. Eleanor Whitford. The ink looked so dark and final on the white paper. Victor witnessed it, added his own signature, and then looked at me with something like sadness in his eyes. I'll have this processed and sent via certified mail to her office. She should receive it tomorrow or the day after. Her office? I asked. Not the house. Legal requirement, he explained. Eviction notices need to be delivered where we can prove receipt. Her office is better, someone will sign for it, and there's no way she can claim she never got it. The thought of that envelope arriving at Clarissa's fancy downtown office, being sorted by her assistant, landing on her desk in the middle of her workday, it felt both satisfying and devastating. She'd probably open it thinking it was something routine. Maybe she'd even be in a good mood, laughing with a coworker about weekend plans. And then she'd read it. And her whole world would tilt sideways. I left Victor's office as the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Harold would have loved. He was always the romantic one, pointing out sunsets and telling me to slow down and appreciate the moment. I'd been too busy back then, too focused on the next deal, the next property, the next step up the ladder. Now I had all the time in the world to watch sunsets. And nobody to share them with. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old photo albums from the hall closet, the ones with the cracked leather covers and yellowing pages. There was Clarissa at age 5, missing her front teeth, dressed as a princess for Halloween. Clarissa at 10, winning the spelling bee at school, holding up her trophy with the biggest smile. Clarissa at 16, rolling her eyes at something I'd said but unable to hide the smile tugging at her lips. When had we lost this? When had the girl who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms turned into the woman who called me worthless? I closed the album and put it back in the closet. Looking at the past wouldn't change what was coming. By this time tomorrow, that envelope would be in the mail system. By the day after, it would be on Clarissa's desk. And by the end of the week, my daughter would know that her mother, the woman she dismissed so easily, still had teeth. I made myself dinner, something simple. Scrambled eggs and toast, eaten standing at the counter because I didn't feel like sitting down. The house felt too quiet, so I turned on the television, some mindless game show that I watched without really seeing. Around 10, my phone rang. For a wild second, my heart jumped, thinking maybe it was Clarissa calling to apologize. Maybe she'd realized what she'd said. Maybe there was still time to stop this. But it was just a robocall about my car's extended warranty. I hung up and sat in the darkness, wondering what tomorrow would bring. The thing about revenge is that nobody tells you how lonely it feels. The certified letter left Victor's office at 8:30 Tuesday morning. I know because he called me to confirm, his voice professional but with an undercurrent of concern. It's done, Eleanor. The courier service has it. Should arrive at her office by noon. I thanked him and hung up, then stared at my phone like it might suddenly ring with Clarissa's voice on the other end. It didn't. The morning crawled by with the speed of cold honey. I tried to keep busy, watered my plants, organized my pantry, folded laundry that didn't need folding. Anything to keep my hands moving and my mind from imagining the moment when she'd open that envelope. By 11, I gave up pretending I could focus. I made tea I didn't drink and sat by my front window, watching neighbors walk their dogs and kids ride bikes home from school. Normal people doing normal things, completely unaware that across town, a bomb was about to go off in someone's life. Noon came and went. Then 1 o'clock. I kept checking my phone, expecting, what? A furious call? A tearful voicemail? Radio silence felt worse somehow than either of those options would have been. At 2:15, my phone finally rang. Not Clarissa's number. Victor's. She received it, he said simply. Signed for by her assistant at 12:43. It's official now, Eleanor. The 30-day clock starts today. My hands went cold. Has she called you? Not yet. But she will. They always do. He paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Are you prepared for what comes next? Because I guarantee she's going to try to guilt you, threaten you, maybe even get other family members involved. This is when it gets ugly. It's already ugly, I said quietly. It got ugly the moment she called me worthless. After I hung up, I sat very still, trying to imagine what was happening in Clarissa's corner office downtown. The building was one of those modern glass towers with views of the whole city. I'd visited once, back when she first got promoted, and been so proud of how far she'd climbed in her career. Look at my daughter, I'd thought. Making something of herself. Was she sitting at her desk right now, staring at the eviction notice with that same disbelief I'd felt on Sunday? Was she crying? Furious? Or was she already on the phone with her own lawyer, looking for a way to fight back? The not knowing was its own special kind of torture. 3 o'clock passed. Then 4. I forced myself to eat something, a sandwich that tasted like cardboard, and tried to watch the news. Some story about a local politician caught in a scandal. I couldn't focus on a single word. At 4:47, my phone exploded. Not a call. A text message. Then another. Then 3 more in rapid succession. All from Clarissa. What the hell is this? You sent me an eviction notice? Are you kidding me right now? This is insane. Call me immediately. Mother. Call me now. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I read the messages twice, then set my phone face down on the coffee table and walked away. Not yet. I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. Maybe I'd never be ready. The phone rang. Clarissa's ringtone. I'd set it to a soft piano melody years ago, back when hearing from her made me happy. Now it sounded like an alarm. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. And again. And again. On the 5th call, I finally answered. Hello, Clarissa. What the hell is wrong with you? Her voice came through sharp enough to cut glass. No greeting, no preamble, just pure rage. An eviction notice? Seriously? You're evicting me from my own house. It's not your house, I said calmly. It never was. It's in a trust that I control. You were living there as a guest, and now you're not. A guest? I've been there for 3 years. You gave me that house. I let you live in it, I corrected. I never transferred the deed. You want to know why? Because Harold and I were smart enough to protect our assets, even from family. Especially from family. The sound she made was somewhere between a laugh and a scream. This is about Sunday, isn't it? Because I made one comment? You're seriously that petty? One comment. She was calling it one comment. Like words don't matter. Like calling your mother worthless in front of strangers is just a casual slip of the tongue. Yes, I said simply. It's about Sunday. But it's also about every cancelled lunch, every unreturned call, every time you've treated me like an inconvenience instead of the person who gave you life. Sunday was just when I finally stopped making excuses for you. Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. I was having a bad day, I was stressed, I didn't mean. You meant it. My voice came out harder than I expected. You meant every word. And now you get to deal with the consequences. Silence on the other end. Then quieter, almost calculating, we can fix this. Come over, let's talk about it. I'll apologize, we can work this out like adults. No. What do you mean no? I mean the papers are filed, the clock is ticking, and in 30 days you need to be out of that house. Find somewhere else to live, Clarissa. This conversation is over. You can't just wait. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Part of me wanted to call her back, take it all back, say I was sorry and we could forget this ever happened. But a stronger part, the part that had spent Sunday night staring at the ceiling feeling like garbage, knew that backing down now would teach her nothing except that she could hurt me without consequences. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off completely. That night, I barely slept. Every time I dozed off, I'd jerk awake with my heart racing, convinced I'd heard someone at the door or the phone ringing. But the house stayed quiet, and the darkness pressed in from all sides. Around 3 a.m, I got up and made chamomile tea, sitting at my kitchen table in my bathrobe and slippers like some kind of sad cliché. What was I doing? Was this really worth it? Destroying my relationship with my only nearby child over hurt feelings? But then I thought about Harold. About how hard we'd worked, how many sacrifices we'd made. About the values we tried to instill in our kids, respect, gratitude, basic human decency. And I thought about what kind of person Clarissa was becoming in that mansion, surrounded by fake friends and expensive champagne, losing touch with any sense of humility or appreciation. Maybe losing the house would be the best thing that ever happened to her. Maybe it would remind her that nothing in life is guaranteed, that even the most generous gifts can be taken away if you don't treat them, and the people who gave them, with respect. Or maybe I was just an old woman trying to justify hurting her daughter because her daughter had hurt her first. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find 17 missed calls from Clarissa and a voicemail so long it had been cut off. I deleted it without listening. Whatever she had to say, I wasn't ready to hear it. But there was also a text from my son Marcus, who lived in London and who I hadn't heard from in over a year. Mom, Clarissa called me freaking out about some eviction. What's going on? Call me. So she was rallying the troops now. Getting family involved, trying to make me look like the villain. I should have expected it. People like Clarissa always play the victim when they face consequences. I didn't call Marcus back. Not yet. He'd made his choice years ago when he moved overseas and stopped returning my calls. If he wanted to take his sister's side without hearing mine, that told me everything I needed to know about where his loyalty lay. Instead, I did something unexpected. I drove to the mansion. Not to see Clarissa, I made sure to go when I knew she'd be at work. I just needed to see the place one more time, to remind myself why I was doing this. The house sat on its hill like a crown jewel, all that glass and stone catching the afternoon sun. The circular driveway was empty except for Clarissa's BMW, sleek and black and probably costing more than most people's annual salary. I parked on the street and just looked at it. Harold and I had been so proud when we bought this place. It represented everything we'd achieved, every late night and missed vacation. And careful investment that had paid off. We were going to grow old here together, host grandchildren, watch sunsets from that enormous deck. But life doesn't always give you what you plan for. And sometimes the people you love most take your generosity and twist it into something ugly. A neighbor was out walking her dog, and she waved at me. I waved back, wondering if she'd heard the news yet. This was the kind of neighborhood where gossip spread like wildfire. Within a week, everyone would know that Eleanor Whitford was evicting her own daughter. Some would think I was cruel. Others might understand. I didn't care anymore what people thought. I only cared about one thing now, teaching my daughter that love isn't unconditional when it's being abused. That even mothers have limits. That the word worthless has a price tag, and she was about to pay it in full. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The mansion stood there, beautiful and cold, and I wondered if Clarissa was inside right now packing. Or if she was still convinced this was all a bluff and I'd cave any day now. Day 3 after the eviction notice, and my phone had become a weapon I was afraid to touch. 29 missed calls from Clarissa. Texts that started angry, turned pleading, then swung back to furious. 3 voicemails from Marcus calling me unreasonable. Even an email from Clarissa's ex-husband, a man I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, telling me I was making a terrible mistake. Everyone had an opinion about what I should do. Nobody seemed interested in asking what had been done to me. I was in my garden, pruning roses that didn't need pruning, when my doorbell rang Thursday afternoon. Through the peephole, I saw Clarissa standing on my porch, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual perfect style. She looked smaller somehow. Younger. For a split second, I saw the little girl who used to show up at my bedroom door during thunderstorms, scared and needing her mother. Then I remembered Sunday, and my heart hardened back to stone. I opened the door but kept the screen latched between us. A barrier. She noticed and flinched. "Mom," she said, and her voice cracked. "Please. Can we just talk?" We talked on the phone. "There's nothing left to say." "Yes, there is." She pressed her palm against the screen. "I messed up, okay? I know I did. What I said was horrible, and I've been awful to you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The words I'd been waiting 3 years to hear. But they came 3 days too late, delivered only because she was facing consequences. Where was this apology on Monday? On Tuesday? Before she knew she might lose something? "You're sorry you're getting evicted," I said quietly. "Not sorry for how you've treated me." "That's not true. Mom, I've been thinking about everything, and you're right. I took you for granted. I got caught up in my new life and forgot about what matters. But we can fix this. Please don't throw away our relationship over one mistake." One mistake. That phrase again, like Sunday existed in a vacuum instead of being the final straw on a pile I'd been building for years. "Come inside," I said finally, unlatching the screen. Not because I was wavering, but because having this conversation on the porch felt like giving the neighbors a free show. Clarissa stepped into my small living room, and I watched her take in my humble surroundings. The worn couch, the dated wallpaper, the second-hand coffee table. Such a contrast to the mansion with its vaulted ceilings and designer furniture. Did she wonder why I chose to live this way when I could afford so much more? Did she understand that some people don't measure their worth by square footage? She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap like a child called to the principal's office. I took the armchair across from her, Harold's old chair, and waited. "I talked to Marcus," she said finally. "He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. That losing Dad changed you, made you unstable." A laugh burst out of me, sharp and bitter. "Of course he does. It's easier to think I'm crazy than to accept that you were cruel." "I wasn't cruel. I was thoughtless, there's a difference." "No, Clarissa. Thoughtless is forgetting someone's birthday. Cruel is calling your mother worthless in front of your friends and telling her to leave the house she gave you." Her face flushed. "It wasn't like that. You're twisting it." "Then tell me what it was like. Explain to me how those words could possibly mean anything except exactly what they sounded like." She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "I was showing off. My friends were impressed by the house, by my life, and when you showed up with your grocery bags and your fussing, it made me look small. Like I was still some kid who needed her mommy to take care of her." She was about to learn that I don't bluff. The honesty shocked us both. At least she was finally telling the truth instead of dancing around it. But the truth was somehow worse than the excuses. "So you made yourself look bigger by making me look smaller," I said. "By treating me like a servant. By using the word worthless about the woman who sacrificed everything so you could have a good life." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't mean it. God, Mom, how many times do I have to say I'm sorry?" "Sorry doesn't mean anything when you're only saying it to get what you want." I leaned forward, holding her gaze. "Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the word. It was how easily it came out of your mouth. Like you'd been thinking it for a while and finally felt comfortable saying it out loud. Like somewhere along the way, you really started believing that I had no value beyond what I could give you." "That's not, I never," she was sobbing now, ugly crying that made her shoulders shake. "Please, Mom. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy, I'll make changes, just please don't make me leave the house. It's my home." "It's not your home," I said, and my voice came out harder than I meant it to. "It was never your home. It was mine and Harold's home, and I let you live there because I loved you. But you can't stay somewhere built on love when you've destroyed that love." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "So that's it? One bad day and you just stop loving me?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded. Did I still love her? God, yes. She was my daughter, my flesh and blood, the baby I'd nursed and the toddler I'd chased through parks and the teenager I'd stayed up worrying about. You don't stop loving someone just because they hurt you. But love without respect is just a slow form of self-destruction. And I was done destroying myself for people who saw it as their right instead of my choice. "I'll always love you," I said quietly. "But that doesn't mean I have to let you treat me badly. That doesn't mean I have to give you a $7 million house while you call me worthless. Love isn't supposed to cost that much, Clarissa." She stood abruptly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Fine. You want me to beg? I'm begging. I'm literally begging you, on my knees if that's what you want. Please don't do this." But she wasn't on her knees. She was standing, arms crossed, that familiar stubborn set to her jaw that I recognized from every argument we'd had since she was 16. Even in her apology, even in her tears, there was something performative about it. Like she was following a script of what a desperate daughter should say without actually feeling the desperation. Or maybe I was being unfair. Maybe grief and hurt had made me see manipulation where there was only genuine regret. How was I supposed to tell the difference anymore? "The eviction stands," I said. 30 days. Clarissa. Start packing." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then something shifted in her expression, the tears drying up, the vulnerability replaced by something colder. "You're going to regret this. When you're old and alone and you need someone, don't come crying to me. You're destroying this family over your stupid pride." There it was. The real Clarissa underneath the apologetic performance. The one who could shift from tears to threats in 30 seconds flat. "I'm already old," I said evenly. And I've been alone since your father died. At least now I won't be alone while someone I love treats me like garbage. She grabbed her purse and stormed to the door, then turned back one last time. Marcus was right. You have lost your mind. Dad would be ashamed of you. That hit harder than I expected. Bringing Harold into this, weaponizing his memory. But I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. Your father is the one who set up the trust to protect us from exactly this kind of situation. He knew that sometimes family needs boundaries. I wish I'd remembered that sooner. She left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I sat in Harold's chair for a long time after, staring at nothing, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or the bravest decision. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Just talked to Clarissa. She's devastated. How could you be so heartless to your own daughter? Heartless. First worthless, now heartless. Funny how the person who'd been hurt suddenly became the villain for refusing to be hurt anymore. I typed back, ask your sister what she said to me. Ask her why she thinks she can call me worthless and still deserve to live rent-free in a house worth $7 million. Then you can call me heartless. I hit send before I could second-guess it, then turned off my phone again. Let them stew in their outrage. Let them paint me as the bad guy. At least I could sleep at night knowing I'd finally stood up for myself instead of rolling over and taking it like I'd been doing for years. That night, I made Harold's favorite dinner, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, slow-cooked until the meat fell apart. I set the table for two out of habit, then realized what I'd done and put the extra plate away. Just me now. Just me and my choices and the consequences I'd have to live with. But as I ate dinner alone in my quiet kitchen, I didn't feel sad. I felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt powerful. And that scared me almost as much as it satisfied me. The next week passed in a strange, suspended kind of quiet. No more calls from Clarissa. No texts. Marcus sent a few more messages that I ignored, then he went silent too. It was like I'd been excommunicated from my own family, cast out for the crime of having boundaries. Victor checked in twice, letting me know that Clarissa had consulted with a lawyer who'd apparently told her the same thing he told me. The trust was ironclad, I had every legal right, and fighting it would just cost her money she'd lose anyway. Smart lawyer. Honest lawyer. The kind who doesn't take a desperate client's money for a case they can't win. So Clarissa wasn't fighting. She was just gone. Vanished from my life as completely as if she'd moved overseas like Marcus. And the weird thing? Part of me felt relieved. Was that terrible? That I felt lighter without my daughter in my life? That my phone wasn't a source of anxiety anymore? That I could go through my days without wondering when the next criticism or cancellation or dismissive comment would come. I started leaving my house more. Before, I'd been kind of a hermit, afraid to miss Clarissa's rare calls or surprise visits. Now I joined a book club at the library. Started taking early morning walks at the park. Even signed up for a watercolor painting class on Tuesday evenings, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when I was building the business. Turns out there's a whole world out there when you're not waiting by the phone for someone who doesn't really want to call you anyway. At my second book club meeting, I sat next to a woman named Dorothy who was probably in her mid-60s, with kind eyes and laugh lines that suggested she smiled more than she frowned. We were discussing some mystery novel, and during the break, she asked if I had kids. 2, I said automatically. Then more honestly, but we're not really in touch right now. That's hard, she said simply. Not asking why, not judging, just acknowledging. It was the first time since this whole thing started that someone hadn't immediately assumed I was the problem. It is hard, I admitted. But also kind of freeing? Is that awful to say? Dorothy shook her head. My son and I didn't speak for 3 years. He thought I should have stayed with his father even though his father cheated on me for a decade. Finally told me I'd ruined the family by getting divorced. She took a sip of her coffee. Best 3 years of my life, honestly. Gave me time to figure out who I was without constantly defending my choices to someone who'd already decided I was wrong. Did you two ever reconcile? Eventually. Took him having his own kids and realizing parenting isn't as simple as he thought. Now we talk every week, and he's apologized about 100 times. She smiled. But I'm glad I had those 3 years. taught me that I don't need my children's approval to live my life. Those words stayed with me for days. I don't need my children's approval to live my life. When had I forgotten that? When had I started believing that being a good mother meant accepting any treatment, any words, any behavior, just to keep the peace? Harold and I used to laugh about being tough love parents when the kids were young. If they broke a rule, there were consequences. If they were disrespectful, they lost privileges. We never hit them, never screamed, but we had standards. We believed in teaching them that actions have outcomes. But somewhere along the way, after Harold died, I'd gotten soft. Started excusing things I shouldn't excuse. Started swallowing hurt instead of addressing it. Turned into the kind of parent who got walked all over because saying no felt too risky. Well, I'd said no now. Said it loud and clear in the form of an eviction notice. And the sky hadn't fallen. The world hadn't ended. I was still here, still breathing, still living my life. Day 15 came and went. Halfway through the eviction period, I drove past the mansion once, couldn't help myself. A moving truck sat in the driveway. So she was actually packing. Actually leaving. Making it real. My chest got tight seeing that truck, but I kept driving. No turning back now. No last-minute reprieve where I swooped in and saved the day and everything went back to how it was. Because how it was sucked. How it was had me feeling worthless. How it was had me giving and giving while she took and neither of us was happy. That evening, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang, and when I looked through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize standing on my porch holding a manila envelope. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you? Are you Eleanor Whitford?" She was maybe 30, professional looking in a blazer and slacks. "Yes. I'm Jennifer Marsh. I'm a journalist with the Tribune." She held up a press badge. "I was hoping to ask you some questions about your daughter's eviction. It's become quite the story in certain circles. Wealthy mother evicts daughter from multimillion-dollar home. Very human interest." My stomach dropped. "How did you hear about this?" "A friend of your daughter's reached out to us. Said it was a story about family dynamics, elder care, that kind of thing. They painted you as, well, I'd like to hear your side before we run anything." So Clarissa was taking this public. Trying to shame me in the press, paint herself as the victim of a cruel, unstable mother. I should have seen it coming. "I'm not interested in talking to the press," I said, starting to close the door. "Mrs. Whitford, please." Jennifer held up a hand. "I understand this is private, but the story's going to run with or without your input. Don't you want people to hear what actually happened?" I paused, hand on the doorframe. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face and pretend this wasn't happening. But another part, the part that had been silent for too long, knew that staying quiet would let Clarissa control the narrative. Let her tell everyone that I was some bitter old woman who'd lost her mind. "Off the record first," I said. "You want to know what actually happened? My daughter called me worthless in front of her friends in a house I gave her. A house I still legally own. So I reminded her that generosity has limits." Jennifer's eyebrows went up. "She called you worthless?" "Those exact words. You're worthless in this house. You don't belong here." Then told me to leave. The memory still stung, even 2 weeks later. So I did leave. And then I sent her an eviction notice. Because the house was never actually hers. It's in a trust one control. Wow. That's not the story I was told. She pulled out a notebook. "Can I quote you on that?" "No. Because this isn't about public relations or winning some sympathy contest. This is between me and my daughter, and it should have stayed that way." I looked at her steadily. "But since she decided to involve the press, you can tell whoever's asking that Eleanor Whitford doesn't need to justify protecting her own dignity. Not to journalists, not to her children, not to anyone." Jennifer scribbled something down anyway. "Just for context, you're really going through with the eviction? Even with all the backlash?" "What backlash?" "A few family members who weren't there and don't know what happened? People who think being a mother means letting your children treat you however they want with no consequences." I shook my head. "I spent 40 years building a business and raising kids. I'm 72 years old. I don't have time left to waste on people who see my love as weakness. Something in Jennifer's expression softened. Off the record again, my mom went through something similar with my brother. He borrowed money constantly, never paid it back, then got angry when she finally said no. Took him 5 years to apologize. Did she forgive him? Eventually. But she said those 5 years without his drama were the most peaceful of her life. Jennifer tucked her notebook away. Look, I'll tell my editor there's no story here. Just a private family matter. But you should know, social media is already picking it up. Clarissa's friends are posting about it, calling you cruel. It might get ugly before it gets better. Social media. Of course. I barely understood Facebook, let alone whatever other platforms young people use these days. But I could imagine Clarissa's friends rallying around her, posting sympathetic messages, painting me as some kind of villain. Creating their own version of events where she was blameless and I was vindictive. Let them. I'd lived 72 years without needing strangers' approval. I wasn't about to start now. After Jennifer left, I made myself tea and sat in Harold's chair, thinking about what she'd said. 5 years of peace. Would it really take that long for Clarissa to understand? Or would she never understand? Would she spend the rest of her life telling people about her horrible mother who threw her out over nothing? My phone buzzed. Against my better judgment, I checked it. An email from someone named Amanda with the subject line, "You're disgusting." I deleted it without reading. Then another. And another. Apparently Clarissa's friends had found my email address. I blocked the senders and turned off my phone. Whatever was happening out there in the digital world, I didn't need to witness it. The truth was the truth regardless of how many people believed a lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt or regret, but because of something else. A nagging feeling that I'd missed something important. Something about Clarissa's visit, her tears, her threats. The way she'd shifted from apologetic to angry so quickly. Around 2 in the morning, it hit me. She'd never actually apologized for the words themselves. She'd said, "I messed up and I was thoughtless," but she'd never said, "I'm sorry I called you worthless." Never acknowledged the specific hurt she'd caused, only that she'd gotten caught causing it. And when I hadn't immediately given in, when I'd held firm on the eviction, she dropped the nice act completely. Threatened me. Brought up Harold to hurt me. Turned immediately to attacking instead of actually taking responsibility. That wasn't remorse. That was manipulation that hadn't worked. The realization should have made me feel vindicated. Instead, it just made me sad. Because it meant the daughter I'd raised, the one who'd held my hand at the beach and laughed with chocolate ice cream on her face, really was gone. Replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone who'd learned that saying sorry was just a tool to get what you wanted, not a genuine acknowledgement of harm. When had that happened? Was it after Harold died and I'd been too soft, too willing to excuse anything just to keep her close? Or had it started earlier, with me and Harold spoiling her too much, protecting her from too many consequences? Maybe it didn't matter when it happened. Maybe all that mattered was what happened next. Day 18. The moving truck was gone when I drove past. Most of the furniture visible through the windows had disappeared. She was really leaving. Really packing up and moving out of the mansion that had defined her life for 3 years. Where was she going? Did she have somewhere lined up, or was she scrambling at the last minute? Part of me wanted to know, wanted to make sure she was okay. But a stronger part knew that checking on her would just open a door I'd worked hard to close. She was a 42-year-old woman with a good job and resources. She'd figure it out. And if she didn't, well, maybe that would teach her something too. My painting class that Tuesday was abstract watercolors. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Lisa, told us to paint our emotions without thinking too much about what they looked like. I ended up with a canvas full of blues and grays swirling into each other, dark at the edges but lighter in the center. Interesting, Lisa said, studying it. It's like watching a storm clear. Very powerful. A storm clearing. That's exactly what it felt like. Not happy, not peaceful yet, but that strange in-between space where the worst has passed but the sun hasn't quite broken through. It's been a rough month, I admitted. Art helps, she said simply. Gives you somewhere to put the feelings so they don't have to live inside you all the time. I took the painting home and hung it in my kitchen where I could see it every morning. A reminder that storms do clear. That darkness doesn't last forever. That sometimes you have to go through the hard part to get to the better part. Day 23. 1 week left. Victor called to let me know Clarissa had officially notified him of her move-out date, the 28th, 2 days early. She was also requesting a final walkthrough to document the condition of the house. Is that necessary? I asked. It's standard for evictions. Protects both parties. You'll want to be there though. Make sure nothing's damaged, nothing's missing. He paused. Are you going to be okay seeing her? Was I? I genuinely didn't know. Part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, she'd show up different. Humbled. Ready to have a real conversation about what went wrong and how to fix it. But I wasn't counting on it. Hope is nice, but expectations are dangerous. I'll be fine, I told Victor. Set it up. The final walkthrough was scheduled for 3 o'clock on Thursday, day 27. I arrived early, parked on the street, and stared up at the mansion one last time before everything changed. Harold and I had bought this place 15 years ago, back when it seemed impossible that we could afford something so grand. We'd walked through it holding hands, planning which room would be the library, where we'd put the Christmas tree, how we'd host Thanksgiving dinners for the whole family. None of those dreams had come true. Harold was gone. The family was fractured. And now I was here to take back a gift that had turned into a curse. Clarissa's car pulled up exactly at 3. She got out wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy day, her face carefully made up, her posture rigid. Victor was already there, professional and neutral, clipboard in hand. Eleanor, he greeted me. Clarissa. Shall we begin? We walked through the house in tense silence. The rooms echoed now, mostly empty except for the furniture that had come with the place. Clarissa had taken her personal items, her additions, all the touches that had made it hers. What remained was the shell of the dream Harold and I had once had. Everything was in good condition. No damage, nothing broken. Clarissa had at least respected the property, even if she hadn't respected me. In the master bedroom, the room I'd imagined growing old in with Harold, Clarissa finally spoke. I'm living in a 2-bedroom apartment now. Downtown. It's loud and cramped and nothing like this. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I hope you're happy. I'm not happy, I said quietly. I'm heartbroken. But I'm also finally standing up for myself, and that's more important than happiness. She turned to face me, and even behind the sunglasses, I could see the anger. You've destroyed our relationship over your pride. No, Clarissa. You destroyed our relationship when you decided I was worthless. I just stopped pretending it didn't matter. Victor cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ladies, perhaps we should finish the walkthrough. We moved through the rest of the house in silence. When we reached the front door, Clarissa pulled out a set of keys and handed them to me, not to Victor, making me take them directly from her hand. One last little power play. I won't forget this, she said. Neither will I replied. She left without another word, got in her car, and drove away from the mansion for the last time. I stood in the doorway watching her go, keys cold in my palm, and wondered if I'd just lost my daughter forever. Victor touched my shoulder gently. You did the right thing, Eleanor. For what it's worth. But standing there in that empty house, watching my daughter disappear down the long driveway, I wasn't sure anymore what right even meant. The mansion sold in 48 hours. I listed it 3 days after Clarissa moved out, and apparently $7.2 million for a property in that neighborhood was considered a steal. The buyers were a young tech couple with more money than sense, thrilled about the good energy of the place. I didn't tell them about the bad energy, the shattered relationships and bitter words that had echoed through those beautiful rooms. Let them make their own memories. Victor handled the closing while I stayed home, unable to face walking through that house one more time as someone else signed the papers. When the money hit my account, I stared at the number on my banking app for a solid 5 minutes. $7,150,000 after fees and taxes. More money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. And all I felt was empty. I called Dorothy from book club. Don't know why, maybe because she was the only person who'd understood without judgment, or maybe because I was just desperate to talk to someone who wouldn't tell me I'd made a huge mistake. The house sold, I told her when she answered. How are you feeling about that? Not congratulations, or that's great. Just asking how I felt. That simple question made my eyes sting with tears I'd been holding back for weeks. Like I just burned down my daughter's life to prove a point, I admitted. Did you burn it down? Or did you just stop rebuilding it every time she knocked it over herself? Dorothy's voice was gentle but firm. There's a difference, Eleanor. Was there? I wanted to believe that. Wanted to think I'd done the brave thing, the necessary thing. But late at night when I couldn't sleep, all I could see was Clarissa's face at that final walkthrough. The anger, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Like she'd finally realized that actions have consequences and mothers aren't infinite wells of forgiveness. She hasn't called, I said quietly. It's been 10 days since she moved out. Complete silence. Did you expect her to call? I don't know. Maybe I hoped she would. That losing the house would make her realize what she'd lost with me too. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Stupid, right? At 72, I should know better than to expect people to change just because you want them to. It's not stupid to hope, but it is painful. Dorothy sighed. My son took 18 months before he reached out. 18 months of me wondering if I'd ever hear his voice again. But you know what? When he finally did call, it was different. Real. Because he'd had time to sit with his choices instead of me rushing in to fix everything. 18 months. I didn't have 18 months. I was 72 years old. How much time did I have left to wait for my daughter to grow up? That weekend, I did something impulsive. I donated $2 million to a women's shelter downtown. The kind of place that helps women escape bad situations, rebuild their lives, learn that they don't have to accept mistreatment just because it comes from family. The director, a woman named Carmen with kind eyes and a firm handshake, cried when I handed her the check. Do you know how many women we can help with this? She asked. How many lives this will change? I thought about my own life. About spending 3 years accepting crumbs of affection from my daughter, because I was afraid that demanding more would mean getting nothing. About all the women out there right now making the same calculation. Is it better to be treated badly by someone you love, or to be alone? Help them learn their worth, I told Carmen. That's all I ask. Help them understand that being alone is better than being with people who make you feel worthless. The donation made local news. Local philanthropist gives millions to women's shelter. My phone, which had been mostly quiet for weeks, suddenly exploded again. Old friends calling to congratulate me. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanting to catch up. Even Marcus sent a text, saw the news. That's really generous, Mom. Nothing from Clarissa. I shouldn't have expected anything. Shouldn't have checked my phone every hour hoping to see her name. But I did anyway, like some kind of fool who hadn't learned that hope and disappointment are just two sides of the same coin. 3 weeks after the eviction ended, I went back to my painting class. Lisa had us working on portraits, which I was terrible at, but there was something therapeutic about trying to capture a human face on paper. All those tiny details that make someone recognizable, the curve of a smile, the shape of eyes, the way certain expressions live in the lines around the mouth. I tried to paint Clarissa from memory. Not the angry woman from the walkthrough, but the little girl she used to be. The one who'd bring me flowers she'd picked from the neighbor's garden, not understanding why that was wrong but so proud of her gift. The one who'd sit on the kitchen counter while I cooked, swinging her legs and telling me rambling stories about school. When had I lost that girl? Or had I ever really known her at all? Maybe the person I missed wasn't actually Clarissa but my own image of who I wanted her to be. Maybe I'd been mourning a relationship that only existed in my head. The painting came out terrible, one eye higher than the other, the proportions all wrong. But something about the smile I'd captured felt right. Hopeful. Innocent. Everything Clarissa wasn't anymore, or maybe everything I'd failed to preserve in her. That's beautiful, Lisa said, looking over my shoulder. Is it your daughter? It's who she used to be, I said. Or who I remember her being. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Lisa squeezed my shoulder. The beautiful thing about memory is we get to keep the good parts even when the real person changes. Nobody can take your memories away. But what good were memories when they just made the present hurt more? That night, I had a dream about Harold. We were in the mansion, back when we first bought it, walking through the empty rooms and planning our future. He kept pointing at spaces and saying, "This is where we'll grow old, and this is where the grandkids will visit, and this is where we'll be happy." In the dream, I tried to tell him it wouldn't work out that way. That he'd die too soon and I'd give the house away and it would all fall apart. But he just smiled that gentle smile of his and said, "Ellie, you can't protect people from their own choices. Not even our kids. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let them learn." I woke up crying, his voice still echoing in my head. Was that really what I'd done? Stepped back and let Clarissa learn? Or had I just been petty and vindictive, punishing her for hurting me? The doubt crept in late at night when I couldn't sleep. During the day, I could convince myself I'd done the right thing. But in the dark, alone, I questioned everything. Maybe I should have been more patient. Maybe one more conversation would have broken through to her. Maybe. Day 43 post-eviction. I ran into one of Clarissa's old friends at the grocery store. Ashley, I think her name was. She'd been at the mansion that day, one of the women laughing when Clarissa called me worthless. She saw me in the produce section and her face went tight. For a second, I thought she'd just ignore me. But then she walked over, her cart squeaking on the linoleum. "Mrs. Whitford," she said stiffly. "Ashley." I kept my voice neutral, waiting. "I wanted you to know that what Clarissa said that day, some of us thought it was out of line." I know I laughed, but I was uncomfortable. I should have said something. She looked genuinely apologetic. For what it's worth, I think she regrets it. She just doesn't know how to admit it. "If she regrets it, she knows my number," I said simply. Ashley nodded slowly. "She's struggling. The apartment is hard for her after living in that mansion. And people have been." She trailed off. "The social media thing got out of hand. A lot of people sided with you. Called her entitled and ungrateful. It's been tough." I should have felt vindicated hearing that. Should have felt satisfied that people saw the truth. Instead, I just felt tired. "I didn't do this to punish her," I said quietly. "I did it because I needed to stop letting her hurt me. There's a difference." "I know. I get it now." Ashley shifted her weight. "My mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. And I think about all the times I was short with her or too busy to visit. I'd give anything to have her back, even if she was annoying or overbearing or whatever I thought she was being." Her eyes got shiny. "Clarissa still has you. She just doesn't realize how lucky that is." After she walked away, I stood in the produce section holding a bag of apples and trying not to cry. Because Ashley was right, Clarissa still had me. I was still here, still alive, still willing to answer if she ever called. But how long was I supposed to wait? How many weeks or months or years should I hold the door open for someone who'd slammed it in my face? That evening, I made a decision. I wrote a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual letter on nice paper with my best pen. It took me 3 hours and 4 drafts to get it right. "Dear Clarissa," it began. "I'm writing this because I don't know if we'll ever speak again, and there are things I need you to understand." I told her everything. About how much it hurt watching our relationship deteriorate. About the hope I'd carried that giving her the mansion would bring us closer. About the specific pain of hearing her call me worthless after everything I'd sacrificed. But I also told her about my love, how it hadn't disappeared despite the eviction, how it probably never would. The last paragraph was the hardest to write. "I don't expect you to forgive me for evicting you, just like I haven't fully forgiven you for what you said. But I hope someday we can both understand that we were both hurting in different ways, and hurt people sometimes hurt each other. The door is always open if you want to walk through it. But I won't chase you anymore. I've spent 3 years chasing, and I'm too tired to keep running. The next move has to be yours. Love, Mom." I sealed the envelope and addressed it to her new apartment. Then I drove to the post office before I could change my mind and dropped it in the outgoing mail slot. There. It was done. I'd said everything I needed to say. Whether she read it, whether she responded, whether it changed anything, that was out of my control now. And for the first time in months, that thought didn't terrify me. The letter sat in that mailbox for 3 days before I got a response. Not from Clarissa, but from Marcus. A phone call at 7 in the morning, which meant it was noon in London and he'd been thinking about this for a while. "Mom," he said when I answered, his voice tight. "We need to talk about Clarissa." Here we go, I thought. Another lecture about how cruel I'd been, how I destroyed the family, how a real mother would have just taken the abuse and smiled. What about her? I kept my voice even, refusing to get defensive before I even knew what he wanted. "She forwarded me your letter. Asked me to read it and tell her if she was crazy for being angry." He paused, and I heard traffic in the background. He was outside somewhere, probably on his lunch break. I told her no, she wasn't crazy. But she also wasn't right. That surprised me. Marcus had been Team Clarissa since this whole thing started. What changed? "I don't understand," I said carefully. "The letter made me think about things. About how I've treated you since Dad died. How I moved overseas and barely called. How I assumed you were fine because you never complained." His voice cracked slightly. "How I took Clarissa's side without even asking what happened first. I've been a pretty shitty son, haven't I?" Tears pricked my eyes. I sat down hard in Harold's chair, gripping the phone. "You've been living your own life, Marcus. That's not the same as being a bad son." "Yeah, it kind of is though. Especially when your mother is clearly going through something and instead of helping, I just believed whatever Clarissa told me." He sighed heavily. "She showed me screenshots of what she posted online. The way she made it sound, you just went crazy one day and threw her out for no reason. But your letter told a completely different story." "What she posted doesn't matter anymore," I said, even though it did. Even though knowing my daughter had publicly painted me as some kind of monster still stung like salt in an open wound. "It matters because it was bullshit. And I helped spread it by telling our cousins and aunts that you were being unreasonable." He was quiet for a moment. "I called Clarissa this morning. Told her that calling you worthless was unforgivable and she owed you more than an apology, she owed you complete acknowledgement of how badly she screwed up." "What did she say?" "She hung up on me." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "She's not ready to hear it yet. Maybe she never will be. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what happened, and I'm on your side. Should have been from the beginning." I couldn't speak. Couldn't push words past the lump in my throat. My son, my distant detached son who I'd thought I'd lost years ago, was suddenly right there with me. Finally hearing me. Finally seeing me. "Mom? You still there?" "I'm here," I managed. "Thank you, Marcus. You don't know what that means to me." "I'm going to do better," he promised. "I'm flying home next month. Spending 2 weeks. We'll actually talk, like real people. Like family should." After we hung up, I sat in that chair for an hour, just breathing. One child might be lost to me, but maybe the other wasn't as far gone as I thought. Maybe some relationships could be salvaged after all. But the happiness was complicated, tangled up with sadness. Because having Marcus back just made Clarissa's absence hurt more. Made me wonder if she'd ever come around like he had, or if I'd spend the rest of my life with only half my children speaking to me. That afternoon, Dorothy called to invite me to a luncheon her church was hosting. Some kind of support group for women dealing with family estrangement. I almost said no. The last thing I wanted was to sit around with strangers talking about my problems. But something made me say yes. Maybe curiosity. Maybe desperation for connection. Maybe just the need to know I wasn't the only mother out there who'd had to choose between her dignity and her child. The luncheon was in a church basement that smelled like old coffee and lemon cleaner. About 15 women sat in a circle, some my age, some younger, all carrying the same weight of complicated family pain in their eyes. The group leader, a therapist named Dr. Rodriguez, had kind eyes and a no-nonsense way of speaking that I appreciated. "We're not here to bash our family members," she explained. "We're here to support each other in setting boundaries, even when those boundaries hurt. Even when they cost us relationships we desperately want to keep." One by one, women shared their stories. A mother whose son stole from her repeatedly, then played victim when she finally pressed charges. A grandmother whose daughter-in-law prevented her from seeing her grandchildren over a minor disagreement. A woman my age whose adult daughter demanded money constantly, then accused her of being selfish when she said no. Every story was different. Every story was the same. People who'd loved too much, given too much, and finally reached a breaking point where self-preservation became more important than keeping the peace. When it was my turn, I told them everything. The mansion, the insult, the eviction, the silence afterward, the doubt that crept in every night. By the end, several women were nodding like they understood exactly what I meant. The hardest part, I finished, is not knowing if I did the right thing. Half the time I feel strong and justified. The other half I feel like the worst mother in the world. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. Eleanor, can I ask you something? If you'd kept quiet, kept letting Clarissa treat you that way, would your relationship be better now? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No. It would just be prolonging the inevitable. Every time she dismissed me or cancelled on me or made me feel small, a little more resentment would build up. Eventually, I would have exploded or withdrawn completely. At least this way, the break was clean. So you didn't destroy the relationship. You just accelerated what was already happening and did it on your terms instead of hers. She smiled gently. That's not cruelty, Eleanor. That's self-respect. Those words settled something in my chest that had been churning for weeks. Self-respect. Not revenge. Not vindictiveness. Just finally respecting myself enough to say this is the line you cannot cross. After the luncheon, a woman about my age approached me. Her name was Patricia, and she had the kind of weathered face that spoke of hard years survived. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 6 years, she said quietly. I set a boundary about her drinking around my grandkids, and she chose the bottle over me. Best and worst decision I ever made. Do you regret it? Every single day. And I'd do it again every single day. She squeezed my hand. The pain of losing them hurts less than the pain of losing yourself. You'll learn that eventually. Would I? I wanted to believe her. Wanted to imagine a future where Clarissa's silence didn't feel like a constant ache in my chest. But 6 years? Could I really go 6 years without hearing my daughter's voice? That week, something unexpected happened. A package arrived at my door. No return address, but the handwriting on the label looked vaguely familiar. Inside was a children's book, the same one I used to read to Clarissa every night when she was little. Love You Forever, by Robert Munsch. The one about the mother who rocks her son through all stages of his life. There was a post-it note stuck to the cover. Just 2 words in Clarissa's handwriting, I remember. I remember. Remember what? The story? The nightly readings? The time when we loved each other simply, without complications or conditions? Or was she remembering who we used to be to each other, before money and houses and hurt feelings got in the way? I sat on my couch holding that book and cried harder than I'd cried since Harold died. Because it wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. But it was something. A tiny crack in the wall between us. Proof that maybe she was thinking about me too. Maybe struggling with this silence as much as I was. I wanted to call her immediately. Wanted to text or email or show up at her apartment and say, let's fix this, please, I miss you so much. But something held me back. Maybe wisdom. Maybe fear. Maybe the understanding that rushing in now would just restart the same cycle we'd been trapped in for years. So instead, I went to a bookstore and bought a copy of another book, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. The one about the tree that gives everything to the boy until there's nothing left but a stump. I packaged it up and sent it to her apartment with my own post-it note, but what about the tree? Let her think about that. Let her consider what happens when one person gives and gives and gives until there's nothing left. Let her ask herself if that's the kind of relationship she wanted with her mother. 2 days later, another package. This time it was a framed photo, one I didn't even know she had. It was from Clarissa's college graduation. She was in her cap and gown, diploma in hand, and I was next to her beaming with pride. We both looked so happy. So connected. Like nothing could ever come between us. Another note, when did we lose this? I studied that photo for hours, trying to pinpoint the exact moment things started going wrong. But it wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 tiny moments adding up over years. Small disappointments and minor hurts that built into something bigger. Like erosion, you don't notice it happening until suddenly there's a canyon where solid ground used to be. This time I did respond. I texted her number, even though I wasn't sure she'd answer. We lost it slowly. But maybe we could find it again if we both wanted to. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. appeared again. Then finally, I don't know how. Neither do I. But we could try. The dots again. Then nothing. She'd read the message, I could see the read receipt, but she didn't respond. For 3 agonizing days, silence. I checked my phone constantly, hoping for a response, getting nothing. Just when I'd given up hope, my phone rang. Clarissa's number. I stared at it for 3 rings, heart pounding, before I finally answered. Hello. Hi. Her voice was small. Uncertain. Nothing like the confident woman who'd told me I was worthless. Do you want to get coffee? Just coffee. Nothing more. I'm not ready for more. Yes, I said immediately. When? Tomorrow? There's a place near my apartment. Neutral territory. Neutral territory. Like we were countries negotiating a peace treaty after a war. Maybe that's exactly what we were. Tomorrow works, I said. What time? 2 o'clock. I'll be there. We hung up without saying goodbye, both of us probably too overwhelmed to figure out proper endings. I sat there holding my phone trembling, wondering if I'd just agreed to get my heart broken all over again or if this was actually the beginning of something better. Tomorrow would tell. Tomorrow I'd sit across from my daughter in a coffee shop and try to rebuild a bridge that had been burned down to ashes. And I had no idea if I had the strength left to do it. I changed outfits 4 times before leaving for the coffee shop. Nothing felt right. Too casual made me look like I didn't care. Too dressy made it seem like I was trying too hard. I finally settled on simple slacks and a soft blue sweater Harold always said brought out my eyes, even though he wasn't here to see it anymore. The drive across town felt both too long and too short. Every stoplight gave me time to second-guess this decision. What if she was just luring me out to yell at me in person? What if this was her way of getting closure before cutting me off completely? What if I said the wrong thing and made everything worse? But I kept driving. Because what if I didn't go and missed the only chance we'd ever get to fix this? The coffee shop was one of those trendy places with exposed brick and baristas with complicated facial hair. Not my scene, but I could see why Clarissa liked it. It was exactly the kind of place that belonged in her new, smaller life. I spotted her through the window before I went in, sitting at a corner table, stirring a cup of something with mechanical precision. She looked thin, tired, older than she should at 42. She looked up when the bell chimed, and our eyes met through the glass. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she gave a tiny nod, and I pushed through the door. Hi, I said, approaching her table. Hi. She didn't stand. Didn't reach for a hug. Just gestured to the seat across from her. I ordered you a chamomile tea. That's still what you drink, right? The fact that she remembered something so small made my throat tight. Yes. Thank you. We sat in awkward silence while I fixed my tea, 1 sugar, a splash of milk. Habits so ingrained I could do them in my sleep. Clarissa watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not angry, but not warm either. Guarded. Careful. I got your packages, I said finally, when the silence became too heavy to bear. I got yours too. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm them even though the shop was plenty warm. The giving tree. That was pointed. It was honest. Same thing, right? She almost smiled. Almost. You always did have a way of making your point without actually having to say it out loud. Was that true? Had I spent years dropping hints instead of speaking plainly? Maybe that was part of our problem. I'd been too soft, too indirect, hoping she'd figure things out without me having to spell them out. And by the time I finally said something directly, it was with an eviction notice instead of words. I sent you a letter, I said. Did you read it? About 20 times. She looked down at her coffee. Marcus called too. Chewed me out pretty thoroughly. He shouldn't have done that. This is between us. No, he should have. He was right. She finally looked up, and I could see tears shimmering in her eyes. What I said to you that day, Mom, it was so far out of line. So cruel and ungrateful and just wrong. I've been trying to figure out how to apologize, but sorry feels too small for what I did. The words I'd been waiting months to hear. But hearing them didn't bring the relief I expected. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad that it took losing everything for her to finally see what she'd done. Why did you say it? I asked quietly. What made you think that was okay? She was quiet for a long moment, her finger tracing the rim of her cup. Honestly? I think I'd convinced myself you were indestructible. Like you'd always just take it. Take everything. And I got comfortable treating you like you didn't have feelings because you never told me when I hurt them. I shouldn't have to tell my adult daughter not to call me worthless. No, you shouldn't. But I'd gotten so used to you accepting everything I did that I forgot you were a person with limits. She wiped at her eyes. The eviction was the first time in my entire life that you actually enforced a real consequence. And it terrified me. Have you ever had someone explain exactly why they hurt you and somehow it makes it worse instead of better? Because now I understood, she'd hurt me not out of malice, but out of the comfort of knowing I'd always forgive her. I'd trained her to treat me badly by never showing her there was a cost. I should have set boundaries sooner, I admitted. Should have told you years ago when you started pulling away that it hurt. Should have said something the first time you cancelled plans or forgot to call. But I was so afraid of losing you that I just kept accepting less and less. So we both screwed up. Yeah, we both did. I took a sip of tea, letting the warmth settle something in my chest. But what you said was still worse, Clarissa. What I did wrong was love you too much. What you did wrong was take that love and throw it in my face. She flinched but didn't argue. I know. And I don't expect you to just forgive me because I'm sorry now. I know it doesn't work like that. So what do you want from this? I asked. Why did you call me here? Because I miss you. Her voice broke. Because I wake up every morning in that cramped apartment and think about calling you, but I don't know what to say. Because I ruined everything and I don't know how to fix it, but I can't just accept that we're done. You're my mom. I can't just not have a mom. The tears I'd been holding back started falling. Not pretty, delicate tears, but the ugly kind that come with gasping breaths and a running nose. I miss you too. God, Clarissa, you have no idea how much. But I can't go back to how things were. I can't be the person who just takes whatever you're willing to give and pretends it's enough. I don't want that either. I want. She trailed off, struggling. I want what we used to have. When we actually liked each other. When spending time together wasn't an obligation. When I didn't resent you for having expectations and you didn't resent me for not meeting them. Can we get that back? I don't know. But I want to try. She reached across the table, hand hovering in the space between us. If you're willing to try too. I looked at her hand, the hand I'd held when she took her first steps, when she got her first vaccine, when we crossed busy streets together. The hand that had pulled away from mine as she grew older, embarrassed to be seen holding her mother's hand in public. The hand that had taken so much from me over the years. Could I really trust this hand not to hurt me again? But then I thought about Dorothy's son. 18 months of silence before he came back changed. About Patricia from the support group, 6 years and counting. About all the mothers who'd had to choose between their children and themselves, and the ones who'd gotten lucky enough to eventually have both. I took her hand. It was cold from the iced coffee, but it squeezed mine with surprising strength. Here's what I need, I said carefully. I need you to understand that respect isn't optional. That I'm your mother, but I'm also a person with feelings and limits. I need you to show up when you say you will, to answer your phone sometimes, to remember that love is supposed to be reciprocal. Okay. What else? I need you to go to therapy. Real therapy, not just once or twice. Because I don't think this is really about me. I think you've got stuff you're dealing with, your divorce, your identity, whatever, and you took it out on me because I was safe. But I can't be your punching bag anymore. She nodded slowly. I actually already found someone. Started going 2 weeks ago. Twice a week. That surprised me. Really? Really? My therapist says I have issues with control and vulnerability. That after my divorce, I created this whole persona of having it all together, and you were a reminder of times when I wasn't perfect. When I needed help. She gave a watery laugh. Turns out evicting someone from a mansion is a pretty effective wake-up call for examining your life choices. And what about me? I asked. What do you need from me? She thought about it, really thought about it. I need you to tell me when I hurt you instead of just absorbing it. I need you to believe that I can handle being called out without falling apart. And I need you to, I don't know, see me as an adult instead of your baby girl who needs protecting. You are my baby girl. I'm 42. I need to be your adult daughter who you respect enough to be honest with, even when honesty is hard. Fair enough. Maybe I had been treating her like someone who needed protecting instead of someone who needed accountability. Maybe my softness had been its own kind of disrespect, like I didn't trust her to handle real conversations. We sat there holding hands across the coffee table while people came and went around us, completely unaware they were witnessing a small miracle. A relationship that had broken finding its way back to something like whole. This doesn't fix everything, I said eventually. I know. It's going to take time. A lot of time. And there might be setbacks. I know that too. And I'm still angry with you. That doesn't just go away. You should be angry. What I did was horrible. She squeezed my hand again. But can we be angry and still try? Can I prove to you over time that I'm serious about changing? Could she? I didn't know. But I knew that sitting here with her, having the most honest conversation we'd had in years, felt better than the cold silence that had stretched between us for weeks. One step at a time, I said. Coffee dates like this. Phone calls. Building back trust slowly instead of pretending everything's fine when it's not. I can do slow. I'm good at slow. She smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. Thank you for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it. You're my daughter. That has to mean something. I finished my tea. But Clarissa? If you ever call me worthless again, or anything like it, we're done. I mean it. I won't survive getting my heart broken by you twice. Never again, she promised. I swear on Dad's memory. Never again. We talked for another hour, carefully navigating around the biggest hurts while trying to find common ground. She told me about her new job, a demotion she'd taken to afford the smaller apartment. I told her about my painting class and the women's shelter donation. We didn't mention the mansion or the eviction or the weeks of social media drama. Those wounds were still too fresh to touch directly. When we finally left, she hugged me in the parking lot. Not a long hug, not the kind we used to share, but something real. Something that said we're trying without promising we'll succeed. Same time next week? She asked. I'd like that. I drove home with tears still drying on my face, but they felt different than the tears I'd cried over the past months. Not tears of loss, but tears of maybe. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe broken things could be repaired if both people cared enough to try. That night, I called Marcus to tell him about the coffee date. He listened quietly, then said something that surprised me. You know what, Mom? I'm proud of you. For sticking to your boundaries even when it hurt. For not just caving the first time she apologized. That takes real strength. Strength. That wasn't a word I'd have used to describe myself lately. Stubborn, maybe. Angry. Hurt. But strong? Maybe standing up for yourself when everything in you wants to just give in. Maybe that was its own kind of strength. The kind that didn't look powerful from the outside but felt like steel on the inside. As I got ready for bed, I noticed the painted portrait of young Clarissa still sitting on my dresser. The one with the lopsided eyes and hopeful smile. I'd been planning to throw it away, but now I set it on my nightstand instead. Because that little girl was still in there somewhere, underneath all the hurt and mistakes and growing pains. And maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to something like that simple love we used to share. It wouldn't be easy.